sopeli upro da upro bindeba Tarama valiana teli sudumo sacerate tendeba Rari shveni sitotle Chidi vide gangui perine deba Cesena saqartvelo
Gamarjoba, and welcome to the history of Saqartvelo, Georgia. I'm your host, Roberto, and this is episode 38, the final siege of Petra, phase 2. In this episode, we will conclude the siege of Petra. I want to thank my Patreon members, who have been amazing as always with their continued support. This show couldn't run without you. I'm going to give you all a shout out now. Thanks to Audrey Neeson, Mark Lemke, Andrew Schneider, Mitchell Dutt, Eric Nicholson from Ranking 76, Gerald Eliasser, Hallie Kuntz from Quest Friends, Quinn Campagna from Noblesse Oblige, Mandy Robertson, who is our amazing artist, and David Montgomery from the Siècle. You are all amazing, and I value each and every one of you. The siege of Petra continued. The Roman troops had broken through the walls of Petra and forced the Persians into the Acropolis of the fortress. With their enemy holed up, the Romans offered pledges of peace and safety to the Persians if they surrendered immediately. They refused, of course, and prepared themselves for their ultimate doom. This would be their last stand. This way, at least if they perished in the fortress, their Shahanshah could commend them for their bravery instead of berating them for surrendering while they still had life in them. Better a hero's death than a coward's way out. Bessus, of course, did not want to lose more Romans to the Persians and commanded one of his soldiers to go up as close as he could, in relative safety, and read a missive that he had written for the occasion. The soldier did so, saying, quote, "Most noble Persians, what has come over you that you are clinging to destruction, courting death with such an irrational passion, and conspicuously dishonoring your valiant deeds? For it is not a manly thing to resist the inevitable, nor wise to refuse to submit to those who have won. Nor, on the other hand, is it inglorious to live by accepting the situation that chance has brought. The charge of dishonor is justly refuted by any necessity that offers no hope of rescue, even if it involves the most shameful actions, for evil, when it is unavoidable, is naturally followed by forgiveness. Do not, therefore, emulate madmen in the midst of predictable danger, and do not give your safety away in exchange for arrogance, but rather call to mind that it is impossible for the dead to come to life, while the living can destroy themselves at a later time, if indeed that seems best. So, make your final deliberation and consider well your interests, knowing that those decisions are best that can still be reversed by those who have made them. For we, on our part, pity you even though you are fighting against your own friends, and spare you though you are courting death, and we expect, as is customary for Christian Romans, to feel compassion for you though you throw life to the winds, and look upon it as a trivial matter. The difference for you will be simply this, that by shifting your allegiance for the better, you will have Justinian instead of Chosroes as master, and we agree to give you pledges to make this binding. Do not kill yourselves when it is possible to be saved. It is not a good thing to linger fondly in danger for no advantage whatsoever, as this is not playing the part of brave men, but simply courting death. He is noble who steels himself to endure the most severe fate when he can anticipate from it some benefit. For men do not applaud voluntary death when even the surrounding danger offers hope for better things, but a useless destruction of life is rash folly, and senseless daring that leads to death under a pretense of being dynamic merits no praise, at least in the judgment of thinking men. Furthermore, you are bound also to take into consideration that you may seem to be showing some ingratitude toward God, for if he wished to destroy you, my men, he would not, I think, have put you into the hands of those who are striving to preserve you. That is our position. Now you must decide what you think should happen to you." End quote. The Persians wanted to hear none of this and shut their ears, pretending not to understand the words of the Roman soldiers, and just went la la la. The Roman soldier returned, and Bessus waited. After a few moments, there was a lack of response from the Persians. He raised his hand and gave a signal to his men. The Romans hurled great balls of fire into the Acropolis and waited to burn out their enemy. The flame spread all along the Acropolis, engulfing the building. The Persians shrieked out in horror, their life flashing before their eyes. There were no reinforcements arriving to save them, and there was no way out of the building. Death by flame, although a sin to Zoroastrians, was better than death by Roman sword. The Romans watched in amazement at what took place. Then, silence filled the air, with only the remaining crackle of flames along the wooden structure. It became apparent to them that Lazica was valuable to the Persians, and the Persians would do whatever they needed to do to keep it. With the battle now concluded, the remainder of their enemies looking like bad barbecue, the Romans plundered the fortress. Chosroes had the misfortune of arming the fortress to the teeth, and for each soldier there, they had enough equipment to supply 5 men. They also found enough food supplies to hold the siege for 5 years if needed. Procopius does mention a small complaint that Persian wine remained a bit sour, but they had a bunch of beans they could eat. Then, they were surprised that the Persians had water, since the Romans thought they had cut off Petra's water supply. And a bit of a side tangent. Chosroes had known that the Romans would cut off the water supply of the city almost immediately, so he ordered his men to build a very deep trench and placed 3 pipelines within it. One would be at the bottom, would be covered by mud and stones up to the middle, then a second one placed on top of that, and then a third one near the top that would remain visible. This way, if one was destroyed, there would be other pipelines bringing water in. The Romans, of course, saw the visible pipeline and cut it. And because they found the one, they did not search for more, since they thought that the Persians would no longer have access to water. However, as the siege continued, they learned that the Persians still had water, so they dug deeper and found a second pipeline, which they destroyed as well, and thought that now the Persians would suffer and surrender. Now that Petra was captured, they saw that there was still water flowing inside, and became quite perplexed. They asked the Persian prisoners how they had water, and the Persians told all, lest they lose their lives. Bessus, after hearing this, sent all the prisoners back to Constantinople to Justinian, and he razed Petra to the ground. The fortress had taken 3 sieges, but this was no longer going to be an issue for the Romans because this defensible position along the Black Sea coast was now gone. Emperor Justinian praised Bessus for finally getting the job done and boasted about his wisdom in tearing down the fortress. To connect with us, feel free to find us on social media under @history_Georgia or on Facebook at The History of Saqartvelo, Georgia. Our intro music is Bindisperia Sopeli by Zedashe. They'll be touring the US in September 2024, so keep a lookout for them. To help this podcast continue, please feel free to subscribe to our Patreon or donate via Coffee or PayPal. The links are in the episode description, and we will be making an episode on David Gariegi. He is a monk that is very famous in Georgia. If you would prefer donating something a bit more tangible, we also have an Amazon wishlist for you to peruse. The best way to help us is via review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast host, as it goes a long way with getting the word out about the show and helping us reach new people to learn about Georgia. Madlaba Danakvambis, and thank you for listening to The History of Saqartvelo, Georgia. See you next time.